Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the CFL York Operations Coordinator. I would like to officially open the seventh session of the Drones for Public Health, Safety, Risk, Humanitarian, and Emergency Management Speaker Series, presented in partnership with York University's Advanced Disaster and Emergency Rapid Response Lab and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology Center for Innovation and Research in Unmanned Systems. I would like to begin today's session with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Tkaronto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event and our participants may be joining from various locations, I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speaker, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. I would now like to introduce our moderator, Michel Arif. Michel Arif is a seasoned geospatial analyst and research and development project coordinator with a strong track record in project management and the strategic application of emerging technologies for disaster risk reduction. She holds a master's degree in disaster and emergency management and has a robust background in applied geospatial technologies. Michel has led and contributed to numerous research initiatives exploring the intersection of climate change, disaster trends, and innovative tools, such as UAVs and remote sensing for humanitarian response. Her work spans global humanitarian efforts as well as community-level resilience building. She is currently focused on advancing local disaster preparedness initiatives, working to bridge technological innovation with practical community-based solutions to enhance early warning systems, response strategies, and recovery planning. Michel, thank you for moderating today's session and for your ongoing support throughout this series. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Francesco, for that introduction. And good morning and good afternoon to everyone joining us here today. Thank you for taking the time to learn with us. We have a fantastic speaker lined up for you today, which I'm very excited to introduce. But before I do, I'd like to go over some housekeeping rules. As Francesco mentioned, I'll be the moderator, which includes monitoring the chat box. So for those of you joining us here, feel free to say hello, where you're joining us from. We also have a Q&A box, which will be open for questions for the speaker. So feel free to pop in your questions there and we'll address them at the end of his talk. So our speaker today is Rahul Singh. Rahul founded the David McAntony Gibson Foundation, also known as GlobalMedic, in 1999 to honor the memory of his best friend who tragically lost his life in 1998. Combining a passion for humanitarian assistance with a frontline emergency perspective, Singh developed GlobalMedic's unique operational mandate of providing efficient and cost-effective disaster relief in the immediate aftermath of a catastrophe using professional emergency workers. Since then, Singh's tireless efforts have created a globally recognized, innovative, and efficient organization, earning him a spot on Time magazine's list of 100 most influential people around the world in 2010. From the delivery of water purification equipment, the installation of field hospitals, and even innovative programs like operating unmanned aerial vehicles to survey disaster zones, which I'm sure he'll talk about today, Singh has continuously strived to develop a Canadian innovation in order to save lives. He has personally led over 30 international disaster missions, some of which I'm hoping we'll hear from today. But without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see that screen being shared and all that? Just yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah. Let's jump into it and hopefully we have a lot of time for some questions and you guys can ask some, some decent questions and we can be a little provocative and edgy. So the topic of the chat will just be about, using drones in disasters, right? Let me just tell you a little bit about us. So David McAntony Gibson Foundation, named after my best friend who tragically, lost his life at a very young age, early 30s, not good. We're always about the right aid to the right people at the right time. It's a mantra. It's a mantra we live by. And when you say right aid and right people and right time, everything changes, right? Except maybe the time bit, right? So the right aid isn't always the same for everyone. The right people, they're always going to change. I mean, it's still people, but the circumstance and the nuance will change. The right time is usually right now, so that doesn't change very often. And the mission is really to just, be the most efficient we can, right? Efficient aid agency, maximum amount of aid, minimum amount of operating costs. It's funny, our overhead cost has been sub 2% for like 3 decades now, and we actually get critiqued for that. It's hysterical. We're actually quite proud of it, but we get critiqued for being too low on overhead. And in a lot of agencies, if they have like $100 million program, not all of it is going into the aid portion. They'd be lucky to see 40% go into aid. We're constantly in the 80 to 89% range, and then the rest is all support, whether it's logistics or delivery. I'll just give you an example of that. We have a team going into Armenia, and they're going to hand out food hampers to people that have been displaced from the Artsakh region. That's a disputed area between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And about 165,000 people have been forcibly displaced, which doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but given that the country is only 2 million, you just think of 110,000 coming into that country of 2 million and just how it would overwhelm the resources that were available. Let's put it in contrast to Canada and how proud we were that we took 35,000 Syrian refugees over the course of 1 year. We're a G7 nation. It's a decade ago, of course. We're a G7 nation with a population to absorb of 35 million at the time. Imagine 110,000 people, 1 week time frame, nation of 2 million, not in the G7, no big economy to back it. You can just see how much more challenging it is. So us going in as a team to provide food hampers, we're spending $47,000 on the actual food hampers that we're buying because we're buying in bulk. It's probably about $90,000 worth of food, but because we're buying in bulk and wholesale and packing the stuff ourselves and then getting it out and then having other agencies pay for the trucking and the logistics, the oversight and the assignment, we're just there to make sure it's done properly. We drive costs down. So we're pushing about $85,000 worth of aid out, but our support costs, volunteers are going. On this next mission, I've got a staffer going. We're developing one of our junior officers. So we're going to lose a little bit in that in terms of funding and cost, because we have to pay them. But let's just pretend for a second it was only the volunteers that were going. The flights are free because they're given by a partner. We're staying in a university dorm, to keep the cost really low. So we're spending about $2,500 to distribute 90 at a cost of 47. So you see, like, even if you did it on the 50 grand total, 94% is actually going into the aid delivery, or the aid portion of the aid delivery. I mean, it's phenomenal. So we're proud of that. Here's all the countries we've worked in. There's a lot of blue on that map. And we've worked in 90 spots so far. Here's our team. You see a big commonality here. A lot of women in this space. We're one of the few agencies where there's a lot of women that are working in leadership roles in the space. And the humanitarian sector is still fairly male dominated on the operations side and the logistics side. But if you just look at our paid teams, it's a lot of passionate folks that are coming in that we're recruiting from, and it's interesting. So they're backstopped by, funny, the slide's old. We have 9,000 volunteers, and that team of professional humanitarians, which is right here, is backstopped by these volunteers. You can see so many of these volunteers. That's the former lieutenant governor of Ontario. So she's presented them with our GlobalMedic medal. You can kind of see the service medal that they're getting. And if you look at that photo, way on the left is like Gord Martineau, who's like a very famous news anchor. 40 years he was the anchor of the evening news here on our board. And then you see next to him, a firefighter, and then next to him another firefighter, and then you get right over to the next of the LG on her right. That's Andrew Huang. He's a drone pilot, right? You go way over to the other side, and you'll have a water technician in Mathan who works for the city of Toronto. There's a couple other firefighters in the background, some more drone pilots in there, but just people from all walks of life, right? Like different ages, different genders, different backgrounds, different education backgrounds, all one passion in common, wanting to help others, right? Like it's fascinating to see folks, get their medal of service because they've earned it so much in terms of what they do. Let's just talk quickly about our program. So we've got 6 programs that we run. By far, the most important thing we do is we get people clean drinking water. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Doesn't matter how much food I give them. It doesn't matter how much medical care we give them. They have dirty water. It doesn't matter that we gave them antibiotics to treat them for their waterborne diarrheal disease, the cause of it, right? You're gonna go home and drink that dirty water again. We just made them drug resistant. They're just gonna come back to us, right? But you can see water, food, the drone program we'll talk about, which we call RescUAV. We think it's a cool name. If you think it's a cool name, put that in the chat for me and remind us that we think it's cool. If you have a cooler name for what we can call it, let us know as well. A flood program, a medical program, and a shelter program. But let's really focus on RescUAV, which is obviously a little bit of a play on the word rescue and then drones, right? So we try to be innovative. Like we really pride ourselves on being innovative, and we think this is one of the most innovative programs that we run, and it's actually a complete game changer in the world of disaster response. We're one of the first agencies to really adopt drones and drone technology and came up with different ways of using it. And in fact, about a decade ago, we were finalists for the Google Impact Challenge grant. Now, Google has this program where they talk about the use of technology for good, and then they award people and agencies and folks that are doing it. Now, I'll be honest with you, my uncle doesn't own Google. This is like a really earned award. They were looking at what we did with drones early on, right? Before drones were so readily available at Best Buy or other places where, I mean, like asking people on the call if you know anyone who uses a drone, that's kind of silly given who my audience is today. But if you went down the hall of your institution or just, asked people in your local coffee shop, do you know anyone who uses a drone? That answer today will be 10 times, 20 times, 100 times more yes compared to a decade ago when we were starting this. And people don't know why we started this program, and I'm going to tell you right now. So 2010, January, big earthquake in Haiti, and we land our teams in Dominican Republic next door. We get on this 30 vehicle convoy, and we're heading in at 4 in the morning. We're up and we're on our way to the Haitian border to cross in. I'll never forget, at the border on the Dominican side, the American strike force, like a Rangers, like these guys are the people they send in to literally take over countries. They were sent in to rescue missionaries in Haiti, and they had attack helicopters, and they would literally land throughout the countryside, grab these missionaries, throw them in the helicopter, and then bring them out to the Dominican border, where they all rendezvoused. 15 attack helicopters up sitting in an area just before the border. It was incredible to see. And I talked to their major general, and I said, listen, we're medics. We've got field hospitals. You've got people you've taken to safety. We got a bunch of buses. Why don't we swap? You give us your choppers. I mean, obviously they're going to fly them and get us into our destination so we could be up running and doing surgical interventions and reestablishing clean water, and we can save the day. And your missionaries who you've already rescued, they could take our buses back to the capital. And, this is a safe country. And, you give him credit. And Major said to me, I doubt I'm going to get that mission approved, but let me ask. He went up the chain, and their Southern Command said no. And we shook hands and went our own way. They regrouped, took their captives to the capital or their saved people to the capital and onto flights home. And we entered hell. We crossed the border. And this is how bad the border was. Like, the guy at the border gate just stood up and stopped our convoy. And I'm like, I'm going to have to fight to get in. Took everybody's passport off our bus and 30 vehicle convoy. I start walking up to him. He doesn't even wait till I get up there. He just opened the gate and waved us in. It was hilarious. Like, there's no record of our teams entering Haiti. No border stamps. Like, can you imagine? So it was a bit complicated when we were exiting, but, we talked it out. So in we go. And then as we approach the capital, a few hour drive, tires are everywhere, burning, buildings are down, wires are down. Every road that we come down, we can't get to our destination because it's blocked or something's got an issue. And I remember thinking at that moment, man, if I just had a baby bird in front of me, a little drone up, how much time would we have saved? I mean, like we lost hours trying to get to where we were. And when we got to the hospital to set it up, like deploy our field shelters, deploy the hospitals, put up the surgical side, install the water units, we'd lost the day. And if you think of the impact of that, how many people lost their limbs? Because now they're still sitting there, pulled from the rubble, survived, massive fractures. And if you set the fractures, you're not chopping the limbs off. But that lost day for us coming in, how many fractures does this turn into amputations? How many people got sick because they didn't have access to clean water? I remember if we just had a drone, we would have been there faster, which means we could deliver our payload faster, which means we could deliver our aid targets faster, which means we could help people faster. And we thought, that's it. That tool will give better decision-making capacity to either the leader on the ground, which on that day was me, or the emergency manager, in an operations center in Ontario or Alberta or wherever it is. So we do 4 things with our drones. So there's ISR, which is the military version of situational awareness. So if I call it ISR, ignore me, just think situational awareness, right? What's going on? There's emergency mapping, there's search and rescue, there's aid delivery, and then look, we broke out something to wildland fires that we're going to talk about, but it would really fall under ISR. But we broke it out for this. So there's really 4 main categories. All right. Here's where we've worked. Remember, if we go back a few slides, look at all those countries, right? Well, that's all the countries for all the programming. This is drone specific, right? And I mean, it's kind of neat, right? Like, look at all those countries. What is there, like 2, 4, 6, 8, 6, 15 of them that we've run drone ops in? Like, that's kind of cool. Now, put that against the work of every other aid agency out there. I don't think other aid agencies have 15 drone op countries in. I remember early on, like a few years ago, everybody was on their first one. We're going to do a pilot in one country, and we were on like our 9th or 11th. Like it was cool. But all I'm saying is, you know, we've done a ton of stuff here and worked in a lot of places. So when I'm giving you discussion points or case studies, it's coming from the perspective of experience. So let's talk about situational awareness. Again, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, if you're a military person joining us today, situational awareness, right? Surveillance, like, are we going to monitor an area, see what's going on, right? Can you that's the ISR explanation there. But let me break this down to you in a very simple term. If I come into an earthquake zone and I fly over a school and I see 11 people gathered in the compound of that school, and then I fly over another school and I see hundreds of people there, don't you think that's good information to have to tell the emergency manager, send your aid trucks here? Because you'll get more people, like you'll reach more people. Or if I fly a route, kind of like that Haiti scenario, and I can tell you a bridge is out or a road is washed out, could I save the convoy hours? Of course, right? So it's all about better information early on to make better decisions, right? Like, have you ever heard the term, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it? It's an old business school term, right? And I think everybody comes up with it now and yaps about it, and they'll probably all take credit for it, but I don't know. It's probably been around since the 70s. It's probably like an old Harvard Business School term. It's probably back from the 1870s, to be honest with you, or the 1100s even. But if you don't have information, you can't make proper decisions, right? Like I'm a paramedic by profession. I'm just about to retire, so I'm gonna have to start saying I was a paramedic by profession. Everything we do is evidence-based and algorithmic-based. I see this arrhythmia on a monitor. Do I shock it? Do I give a drug? Like, how am I going to see something, identify it, cure it, right? Or provide symptom relief to it. It's the same thing in emergency management, right? I want to get the aid to people. I need to know where the people are. I need to understand what the obstacles are. What am I going to do? Am I going to wait for people to phone into a call center? Well, we have 911 for that. We have 311 now created for it. When you see a situation unfold like the recent ice storm in Ontario with all these trees down and wires down, do they set up another number for that? Of course they do, right? So you're going to gather information from the ground, and it's going to be like 2-dimensional or 1-dimensional, however you want to look at it. can you gather information from above? And if you can get better information from above quickly, it's not going to make your entire decision, but it'll influence your decision, what assets to send where. So situational awareness, one of the most tangible things done here. We just flew drone flights in Aurelia for identifying where the trees were down onto the wires, going street to street, right? And so we could categorize it in those branches are down, they're on wires. You need a professional to come take those off. Those branches are down, they're in somebody's yard. That can wait a few days. That's just cleanup. Those branches are down, didn't take the wires out, but blocked the street. You need to get a crew to get it off the street, move it to the side to open it up. Can you see how those are three different tiers of response, right? Because one's going to prevent an ambulance from going to a heart attack, right? The other's going to upset somebody in their yard for a few weeks while they recover. And the other's going to prevent power from being turned back on to not just the house, but to the neighborhood, right? So can you see how you tackle them in different ways? But how do you know where they are? Man, aerial assessment gives you quite the view. Back in March, so like last month, which kind of seems like a year ago right now, given everything that's going on around the world, between the earthquake in Myanmar, the war in Gaza, the unprecedented violence in Ukraine, I mean, all these wars. We live in a situation today where there are more people displaced by violence, by angry young men with guns, than at any point in our recorded history, more than World War II. You ever think I'd be saying that? I didn't, but we've been saying it for a while now. So we flew drone flights in Grand Valley. I mean, you're in front of a computer, you can look it up. Grand Valley, Ontario. It's just northwest of Orangeville. And we mapped out the river and we looked at how high it was rising. We could see where the floodwater had come into, if it was starting to come back a little bit. We could provide that situational awareness for the emergency managers, right? So these are all real-time things, right? Ecuador, same thing. In an earthquake zone, we could tell you what buildings were down. We could tell you what roads were open. They actually wanted us to go and map out some of their LNG tanks on the coast, right? Critical infrastructure, just to see if there's leaks. And you can change the payload to do that. So you get the idea about situational awareness. Oh, you know what? I got a couple of photos here that we can show you on situational awareness, like whether this is the Bahamas or where this is. You see the roads are clear. Do you think those roads were clear like before? Like this debris would be on the road, right? Another example of what road is out. This is an interesting one too, because one of the things we had done in Colombia when the volcano was erupting. Sorry, Colombia or Guatemala? My bad. Guatemala. When the volcano was going, we were mapping out what routes the lava flow was coming down to tell what villages were threatened. Like, let that shake your head for a second, right? We would it would erupt, it would come down. We would be up trying to get this imagery, and then it's just an incredible thing, because we could forecast and say you've got like half a day's notice to move that village. Like it was phenomenal, right? Then let's talk about disaster mapping, right? And like, why is this important? So if you own a house and you get a windstorm and you lose some shingles from your roof, right? You're going to call someone, they're going to go fix it. You're going to try and make a claim to your insurance company. If it's really bad damage, your insurance company's gonna say, hey, you need proof. Like, get some photos, right? So you might bring a drone guy in, or take your own, or your kid will take a drone, or your neighbor or someone now will come up and get you some imagery. You'll give it to your insurance company, and you can tell the adjuster where to go, because now you have proof, right? Yeah, look, my shingles are off, fix them, or pay me to fix them, or reimburse me, right? The idea of an insurance company asking for proof is no different whether it's for your home or your car that gets damaged, or to a country that's just undergone a massive disaster, right? So let's play out the Bahamas, right? Hurricane Dorian sits on the country, barely moves, Category 5 storm. arguably the most powerful in history in its time, and it's funny. Every year we just say, okay, this was an even more powerful storm because they're getting worse, more frequent and worse, more impactful, and there's more people in harm's way on where they're hitting. So when all those buildings are damaged, who's the insurance company for them? Is it the World Bank? Is it the Caribbean Development Bank? It's someone who's going to give them money to help rebuild, right? What do you think they're saying to the Prime Minister of the Bahamas when he or she asks for money? Prove it. So we come in as an agency and we offer this incredible free service whereby we will map out the damage, right? Cross-stitch hundreds of thousands of photos, map out damage. People get to assess it so we can see, what homes are down, what roofs are gone, depending on, whether it's an earthquake or a hurricane or what have you. But guess what? We give that information to the emergency managers and government, right? And they get to say, here's the proof, right? So they can tell you how many people are impacted, right? So why is that important? Is that the aerial surveying, the real-time data, the coordination of relief efforts, that links right back into the situational awareness piece. But the comprehensive damage assessments is the most important piece because we can say, here's exactly how much is damaged, right? So, I mean, look, it could be as simple as this in kind of a rural village where you're coming in and saying, look, I can show you where the roofs are gone from these homes, right? Upper right. Can you see that? Some of the roofs are damaged, right? Upper left first home. See that the roof is gone, right? You know, we can then cross stitch it back together and then overlay it. Now, this is obviously a much higher view, right? This is also what cross stitching comes in because the darkened pieces are the original, and then the pieces that are over in highlighted are recently flown flights to pop them in and overlay onto this so we can come in and give it, right? So it's just more information, but this information is more used to prove the damage to get money. And then guess what? If you're the shelter cluster and you're responsible for targeting program and money and saying, okay, here's money for your homes or your houses or your roofs or whatever, you're going to use our maps to identify which homes are getting it, right? So it's neat. Let's just flip to search and rescue. I'm sure you see tons of search and rescue um, options for use of drones, right? So let's go through a couple. So think back a few years, about a decade ago, all the Syrians kind of fleeing down. They'll get into Turkey. They'll try and get on these shitty boats and get into Greece and then march across Europe to get to Germany, right? Um, we don't know where those boats are. Like there's 50 landing points on some of those islands in Greece. We don't know when they're coming. You drones up with thermal, you could see them, right? You could see people like that. That's an amazing life-saving tool, right? Just the infrared. You could see where those boats are coming. You could formulate the trajectory of where they're going to land. Because look, when the boat gets close to shore and it gets ripped up by the rocks and people end up in the water and they die so close to their intended destination, which would be the Greek Isles or the Greek Isles to start, their journey onto their final thing. And it's just so spread out because you got 50 places to cover and just not enough people to cover them. If you can get that trajectory of like where you think they're going to end up because of a drone, like that's fantastic, right? If you can use thermal to go identify the number of people that have sought refuge in those schools, you're using the drone to now send rescuers in, right? You can use drones to hover over downed buildings, right? So let's say you have an earthquake and a structural collapse situation, right? You can use ground penetrating radar. Well, there's two ways to use ground penetrating radar. You either set it up on the periphery and trying to, triangulate where you think survivors are, and you're looking for chest rise fall, like breathing or a heartbeat, right? Well, once you think you know where someone is, now you got to climb onto the rubble pile. Think how incredibly dangerous that is to now try and angle in with your ground penetrating radar to isolate them. Don't you think it's a little easier to use a drone? You can hover on one spot and then target. Like it's incredible, right? The payloads that these things can carry. Okay, so let's say I'm in Houston now, and the city's flooded out, and I've got grandma sitting on the roof of her house in a neighborhood, and I want to send a boat to her. Well, can I get a drone in to see where she is? Can I use that drone to guide my boat in? Right? That makes sense. Search and rescue support, right? Let's say I've got a building down or a building that's teetering. I don't want to put a dog in to go up and see if there's survivors. I don't want to put a person in, right? Can I use thermal on the drone? Maybe get up, look in from the windows to see if I have survivors? Because if I have survivors, can I yell at them to come out or how to guide them out using a speaker off the drone? Can I drop a phone into comms with them, right? Can I identify that I have survivors to now put rescue assets onto it, right? Again, um, you lose the drone, you're not losing a person, right? So it's just something to consider. So this is here's a couple little videos here. You can kind of, see the drone up and then trying to look in to see if you can find some survivors. Again, you can swap some payloads. You can change different angles in with this. I'm just using some footage from another group. This is probably stuff that we shot, with the partners drone. This looks like Nepal, from where I'm looking at here. But I'm just trying to give you this little aerial perspective of it, and then just imagine changing payloads, right? Either Nepal or Ecuador. Not on this. Hang on. You remember I was saying if we want to look inside a building that's teetering? There's a reason I'm saying it. We did. This is an older drone, like a DJI. I forget what this is, an Inspire or something. Big and bulky, and it's got a big camera. But we're going to go up and try and see and then we'll swap that payload to thermal, just trying to see if we've got survivors up there, because that building's coming down at some point, right? Next little shake, that's coming down. You can see the pilot off to the right, who's coordinating. You see this guy's just throwing this one up in the air. It's going back just over a decade. I think as you'll start to see with time, the drones are getting smaller and the technology is getting better. Here's a command post, with a team, because we can plug all this back in, and you kind of see like these are commanders in, saying, okay, well, this is the information I have. This one looks like it's Columbia. That looks like the riverbed, and they're just trying to see where these boulders are, and because the river's flooded out and pushed a bunch of boulders on, and identifying like a weak point. But the idea is just to kind of show you, how you can get information, into folks, right? And then there's a team on the bottom right that looks like Ecuador, and I think they're just going to go fly a different mission in. Again, these are some older photos, right? Okay, let's talk about aid delivery, right? We're lucky. We're one of the first agencies to actually have a cargo bridge, like an air bridge, but using a drone, a drone air bridge, into one of the First Nations, the Beausoleil First Nation, right? And we delivered PPE using it. You just think of all the applications, right? You can deliver somebody their inhaler, if they're having an asthma attack, instead of trying to get an ambulance across the ferry onto an island, right? If somebody was in a cardiac arrest, you need to deliver a defibrillator, you could. I mean, the applications were incredible. Like we were thinking, oh, could we get COVID tests, right? Can we get vaccines out, on this? That thing is, I think it's called the Sparrow. Drone Delivery Canada uses this one. All the cargo fits in the belly of that. This is obviously like 5 kgs or something. It's pretty small. I mean, you can see I'm bigger than it. But this is what it looks like. That's the takeoff and landing point on the mainland. On the other side, we'd set up basically the same thing. The cargo goes inside. Once it lands and it's safe, the operator can come into the safe area, take out the cargo, put the covering back on, and it'll come back over. So it's interesting that we've done it here, but I look at so many areas around the world where we could deliver aid, to places that are so isolated and so difficult to reach. And look, $1,500 an hour for a helicopter, right? What's this, 15 an hour in operating costs? 30, like it's not much, but you can either swarm these and have so many of them, or you can just run longer and cheaper, right? This is another angle of the little station that they had set up. Obviously, they fenced it off. They didn't want people, coming in and taking a look at it. What is this thing? I think this is I think that was it flying, right? Like you would never think this thing could fly when you look at it. And then here's like a little
tonight on City News
clip.
Getting emergency supplies to remote First Nations communities. Coming
this
up,
is
how
like
drones are changing how
a news
GlobalMedic
story.
can save lives.
Please stand clear of the drone.
The new partnership is about using drones to deliver aid in the last mile of delivery.
It's a unique trial program between GlobalMedic.
So we're not going to watch 2 minutes of a City News story, but that's like the height of the pandemic, right? And you remember we were all terrified. We didn't know what
tonight on
in the world, right? And here we are trialing something new, being innovative, working on aid delivery. And I know the specific example was I gave you was that First Nation, but like when we were working in Hurricane Matthew in Haiti, we literally had to fly helicopters into isolated areas. And do you know what it's like flying a helicopter into like a very impoverished country? People run towards the helicopter. You can't touch it down safely. Like you could kill people, right? It's horrible. So how are you going to create those safe landing zones? You don't want to throw aid out of the helicopter. And then the helicopter is just so expensive. And honestly, the helicopter can be used to carry people or rescuers or medical patients. Like there's just so many better uses for that expensive level of technology. Having cargo drones to go and deliver that aid and just go back and forth is just a better option. So there's plenty of application choice. Now, I will say something a little controversial. When you work in war zones, most people don't want to see the word drone because they're so associated to things firing missiles and killing people. But if you've got pockets of neighborhoods that are completely cut off because of fighting, you can use those drones to come in and drop aid, food, water purification tablets, medicines, to people, whether it's the rooftops of buildings or areas. Like the military uses a lot of these drones with a little claw hook to drop medical gear into a wounded soldier right on the front. Because, if the drone gets shot, so what, right? You're not risking a person. And I think you're going to see drones used more in this way, this aggressive way of trying to, I think that the deliver aid side of it is still so controversial and people are terrified of it. I know when we make suggestions that we'll ask for money to give us grants so we can pilot a program in Syria, like in an urban war zone. And they look at us like we have three heads, but we're like, no, think about it. Let's walk through the process. You have civilian populations that are completely cut off from assistance. They can't get life-saving aid, but I can fly right over the top of the guys with guns and drop this aid in. Like if your fear is I'm going to deliver a weapon, don't be afraid of that. We're not. We're humanitarians. And what are we just adding to the conflict by putting other like good drones in where people are using bad? Like, I mean, it's going to be really hard to deconflict that moving forward, and the world's not necessarily ready to fund that. But we're trying to push the boundaries on it, and we're asking, and you should see the conversations we have. People are like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. And we're saying, well, why not? Like, why can't we use this tool to save lives, right? And there's so many real-time contexts where people are in absolute trouble, and we're like, but we have some tools that can do it. Like, you think it's okay to do an airdrop with an airplane, which you might kill someone with, like that heavy bag of rice that hits somebody when it lands that nobody wants to talk about. But this can be more targeted, smaller, more realistic aid, right? So it'll be interesting to see how it changes. I think you'll see it on the battlefield emerge, and don't know that they'll actually show how they do it because the sensitive nature of the intelligence that they're gathering and not wanting to share it. And then I think you'll see it unfold into the humanitarian sector. As we lose more humanitarians, like look at Gaza, 400 aid workers killed, right? How much of that aid could have been drone delivered? And now, obviously, that's a very complex setting, but I think you're going to see this change. And I know that's a little controversial, but you know what? We got to save lives, and we got to use every tool at our discretion. So let's talk wildland fires as well. So Yeah, look, fires are getting worse. It's everywhere now. Like it's incredible. So wildland fires, we have to beat them on the ground. We have to beat them by the air. But drones are incredibly useful for this because look, you can detect from the air where fires are. You can geolocate. So let me tell you about Bolivia. We sent in drone teams there who used thermal and would go in and identify where the fires were. And they'd geolocate them and they'd literally be able to like fly at night, right? And they'd literally be able to tell the ground crews, hey, these are your GPS locations of where you've got to get to. So they could go in. But then the aerial bombers, it was too smoky. They had no idea where they were dropping. So they could actually create geolocated tag routes. Like I think it's like Star Wars, trying to blow up the Death Star, right? Stay on target, stay on target. You're in that little area and you're trying to put these two little missiles to blow up this Death Star. It's the same thing with this. They're flying blind. We're just giving them the geolocations of where to fly and where to drop the water based on what we saw from the fire 2 hours before. Like, and the drone's a $7,000 tool. Like, think of that, right? Or maybe a $14,000 tool with the payload of thermal and geolocation. Like, just think of the insanity of that. Like, that would have been $500,000 the year before, right? Or a helicopter now the pilot can't see. Like, it's incredible what can be done with wildland fires. BC started this, what, 3 years ago? One of our members is actually one of the original pilots that are flying these missions, and they literally fly at night, so there's no air traffic in the day. Those water bombers are sleeping, and they'll identify, and then they'll just keep giving them the information, and they'll keep hitting it. Remember I said early on, ISR, situational awareness, better information to emergency managers, better decisions? No difference. This is it. It's the same thing, just a different application. So you can kind of see, you can detect it, you can auto detect it. This is from a, can't remember if this is a BC shot or one of these. I borrowed this from one of our pilots. Here's what it would look like on thermal. I know it really looks weird, but you can see the fire spots, right? Like you can see what's brighter and what isn't. Now this is an angle shot. You're not going to geolocate from this. You need to top down to geolocate from what I get. But it's fascinating what you can do with this technology. Now, that being said, I will ask you for two things. One, follow us on social media. I put those up there for you. At the very least, if I can get like 3 more follows to the agency from this, I'd be ecstatic. And let's just go back to questions.
Thank you, Rahul. That was a really good presentation, very comprehensive. We do have a couple questions for you. But again, thank you for giving us a really good picture and overview of what you guys do. And it's incredible to see teams going in and using aid in the manner that you do. So it's rare to see, but it's really good. It's really nice to hear that there are some. So the first question that we have is from Frank, and he was curious about what happens when your drones get lost? Do you have a loss of device protocol in a situation where you might lose control of a drone? Do you have trackers, Apple AirTags maybe? That's the question that came in.
So our first rule is don't lose them. It's funny. We tend to fly some higher end stuff. So like Sky Raider, which was an Arion creation out of Waterloo, which is now, that company's been sold a couple of times, right? Teledyne FLIR has them now. Those things are like $250,000. Like they're pricey. And they were very kind to us. They'd be like, just fly it to no end, like push its limit. And I'll never forget, it was like maybe 12 years ago or 10 years. It was a long time ago. We're in the Caribbean. We're trying to map out the damage from a storm. Gust of wind comes in. It was like 100-mile-an-hour gust, blew us out to the ocean. 150,000 US dollar drone.
Oh no.
Blown out, right? And like, can you imagine the look on everyone's face? They'd be like, "What?" And maybe 6 minutes later, it came right back. Like it was incredible. They were like, so they put it down, pulled the data cards because no one's gonna believe that story, right? Swapped it, went it out, put it back up. Another gust of wind, put it right into a mountain, destroyed it. Went to hike up and get it, which sucks, right? So we do have some tracker stuff on it. A lot of the more expensive drones come with their own, right? It's not like an Apple Air thing or whatever. They'll have their own. Sometimes what's happened to us is like Colombia, I'm not sure if you guys know much about the history of Colombia. Colombia had a lot of problems with civil war and different armed groups, right? And different armed groups controlled different parts of the territory. And at some point, a lot of the armed groups went from being, look, we're a communist rebel to we're basically narco traffickers because that'll pay us our money, right? So if you start running cocaine labs in the jungle, you don't really want the government to find you. So what do you put down to protect you? Landmines. If I lose a drone in an area that's controlled by the FARC, I'm not going back to get it. See what I mean? Like, we're not hiking through landmines, to go retrieve a piece of equipment. Now, there was one area where we'd lost one and we had to go back, and I mean, it was a horror show hiking through the jungle to get this, right? So we do have protocols for it, but like, kind of safety overrules those protocols, especially when we're working in complex areas, right? Like it is a little different. One thing with like Ecuador, if you're in some of the higher up altitude cities, like, in Ecuador, man, you're launching off rooftops because you got to come way up, to get out and look, and then you're landing onto rooftops. Like there's much, like perspective wise, there's less room for error, right? For your landing. I mean, takeoff's not as bad. But I'll never forget, like in Ecuador, these guys play volleyball on the rooftop and they put this netting up on one of their buildings. And, so they spike it, it hits the netting, it'll come back down, and nobody's getting hit by a volleyball down on the ground. And we were like, hey, we want to use this building's still intact. It was a really rich person that owned the building. We're like, they cut down the net 15 seconds. They were like this is your drone spot now, right? It was big space that we could take missions off of and then do the mapping and they just wanted to help. So I'm sure, here we are a few years later, I'm sure their netting's back up and they have pretty good volleyball games, but it is interesting. So I think I've answered that question on your lost protocols. How do we get them back? Just don't lose them if you can.
Perfect. That is the first, I guess, line of defense. Don't lose your drones and then try to retain them. Yeah, so we have a few other questions. One might be more about the disaster operations, but how do you navigate different drone regulations across different countries? Is it necessary to complete your paperwork and compliance before you deploy, or do you usually fill out paperwork when you're there, or is it kind of waived because you're an aid organization? I'm just thinking FAA or Transport Canada, how they work here.
So if you look at the International Transportation Forum, or ICAO, they're separate agencies, but they talk a lot. And you look very early on at their concept of flight ops, their paper. It's us. Like you'll see us on the paperwork. It's our samples. We were one of the first groups that told them what we were doing, and they used it as an example and then put it in. And they're like, hey, here's a template that everyone can use, which is, it's funny because it's like it's our institutional property or intellectual property as an agency, but we're cool. Like we're like we'll just share it with everybody. And if you can improve it, tell us how to improve it and we'd be good. So every country's got their own drone rules. And you have to be in compliance with all of them, right? Just like insurance, we need our insurance to be applicable to the countries. Like we don't fly in the States. Guess what? They're a litigious bunch. Like we're going to get, our insurance won't allow us to operate in there, right? So if we are going to put our people in, we're under a different umbrella or a different group. And our gear is not flying there because it's not insured there. But like, so Nepal, they're pretty upset when people were flying drones because they didn't really want to show the extent of the damage of the earthquake, and they cracked down on everyone, right? So, but yet we were tasked to the military and tasked to the civil defense, and we flew missions, right? Colombia, same thing. We were lucky in Colombia because Colombia is much more of a militarized zone than people think, especially a few years ago. But because we were in Ecuador for the earthquake, where we were assigned to the special forces to go and map out all the damage in the areas, fly the highways, go check the LNG stuff, that Colombian military disaster teams were in helping. So when Colombia got hit the following year, it was the Colombian military that asked for us to come in, but it was the same colonel who was assigned to Ecuador. So it was much easier, right? And then what he did was he asked us to come and fly different missions. Now we've been in Colombia a couple times flying missions. One of them was for flooding that created mudslides and all kinds of, and it's interesting because one of the most interesting missions we ever flew. We flew up the river and we were trying to identify big boulders that, if they were pushed down, could kill people or destroy a home, because it's the boulders that push out, right? And we had identified several, geolocated them, and then we got to hike up one day. They actually went in and drilled into these things and blew them up. Now, of course, the commander wasn't stupid. He was like, "Oh, well, now that you hiked up here, can you go get an aerial shot of us blowing this up?" That's the only reason you brought us here. You know what I mean? We identified the target for you. Now you just want a cool shot of. I'll never forget though. You remember early on, it was always cards. Everything was on cards. It wasn't live stream or whatever. You know, commanders like pulling out a little SD card and say, "Can you put this in to the drone and go get the image, and I'll have the card back." And we're just like, "Why don't we just swap cards?" You know, like this is, or we'll just put all the info down. But yeah, no, you've got to coordinate. You've got to let everybody know. Bahamas was an interesting one because we were working in is it Grand Bahama Island, Freeport, and that's actually an autonomous region. Like it's controlled by the Port Authority, and then they actually shut down the airport because they wanted us to map out their runway for damage. Imagine, it's the first time an international airport's been shut down for drone flights. Like,
That's incredible.
much of an international airport, you have 2 flights a day, right? Like 2 big flights or 3 or whatever. But still, it was interesting. And then they asked us to map out all the damage for them. So yeah, you get your permissions, but you have to come in with a good concept of operations. You're explaining why, and we go in and explain them. Like Bolivia, Bolivia is aligned to Russia and Iran and China. It's not aligned to the West, and the West would call it a narco state, right? It asked for international help. When we come in there with drones, to go fight fires in the Amazon, what do you think the what do you think counter narco trafficking guys are doing? Like, you can go find the drug labs. I'm like, guys, like they're going to use a much more sophisticated drone for that than this. This is really used for finding the fires, you know. And if the drug labs are putting off that kind of heat, they're not a drug lab. They've been blown up. You know what I mean? Like these are for fires. But do you see how weird the context can be, right? Like, you're using a tool that can be used to, stop narco crime, right? And not everybody's going to want that flying in their area, right? Like, just you have to understand that nuance as well, right? Like, so not everybody wants them, but we'll make the offers. We'll come in with the gear. We'll come in with the pilots. We're pretty professional at what we do, and we'll acquire the data and then share it. But it's not always easy, you know.
Mhm.
What am I saying? It's never easy.
I can imagine. For sure. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. This one popped up. I think it was during the last question that you were answering. Jake was asking, is it a Hummingbird drone or a Nova Fire that the pilot is from? I'm not sure if you remember what kind of drone you were flying. Have you flown a Hummingbird drone?
No, I don't think I've done the Hummingbird and the Nova. Do you know which one it would be? Would it be, was he talking about like the fat cargo drone, or which one was he talking about?
I'm not sure, Jake, if you're listening, if you could clarify that question just a bit while we move on to the next one. Oh, Jake might be there.
I just
Sure, yeah,
gave
go
permission to
ahead.
talk in case Jake's here
Yeah,
and wants to
perfect.
clarify.
Feel
Might
free
be
to jump
interesting
in.
to see.
Oh, it's the pilot who works on Wildfire. I don't think he's flying Hummingbird. I don't like I'm trying to remember the name of the agency that he works for. It's like a subcontractor in BC. And I could probably ask him here. He'd probably answer me, but I don't think it's that. Nova Fire, we we don't use those now, but I think they just reached out to us on something. A lot of drone companies do chat with us because we have access, right? And the interesting thing is, on the guy who does the Wildfire, Jowet's his name. He's tremendous, really good guy. Um, that's a tough job, right? Because you're working overnight, you're flying like you're in the middle of nowhere, man. It's like dead of night. You can't see nothing, like, and he's flying those missions, he's gathering that data, he's trying to get the data up to the incident commander, who's then going to assign the teams to go out on the next day. You're just a piece of it, right? But it's interesting to see how that's being used. Um, We're actually in the process. We run a very comprehensive wildfire program across the country. We get fire skids, so tanks mounted on skids with pumps and hose, turns any pickup truck into a fire truck, right? So we get a couple hundred in Canada. In fact, I'm actually building them in Bolivia now to give the local departments. This is give people better tools. But we're about to train 8 or 10 departments in Alberta. Well, I'll probably ask Jowett to come out and do some of the training. Some of our folks will go train. It's the other neat thing about flying with us, right? Like it's not just missions sometimes. Sometimes it's training as well. It's kind of neat to share some skills. So
Yeah, definitely. I see we are running out of time, but I'm sure people have more questions. I'm sure they can reach out to you on social media if they do have some, but this is a really fascinating topic. I love the marriage between disaster operations and drone use. So I think there's just so much more to explore in that area about like operations and how you guys go, like what your setup looks like. Do you analyze all your data in field? Do you take some home? Do you do it later on? Do you connect to the server? Like tons of questions I'm sure people will probably have for you. But since we're running out of time, I'll just pop your email into this chat box if anyone has any questions for you. And I'll let Francesco say his final conclusion thoughts as well. But for me, thank you so much for this presentation.
I would say though, if you are interested in drone stuff, we're a cool agency to volunteer with, especially, if you want to do data analysis or you want to be checking maps for us or doing other stuff, like reach out, try and join the program. We're always looking for help. And we like skilled help, right? So
Like, yeah, and you're based in Ontario, right?
yeah, we're in Tobico. We're in the west end of Toronto, but I mean, look, we're global operations. Jowett lives in Victoria. We pull him all the time. There's people from across the world that will pull. It's a cool group,
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, just for everybody who's still here, thank you so much. I did share our social media information in the chat. I also shared my email. If anybody wants to follow up with any questions for Rahul, you feel free to email me and I can pass them along and get you those answers. I also shared the link to the GlobalMedic page where you could see more about GlobalMedic as an organization, and there's a tab for volunteering there as well if you're interested. Aside from that, thank you so much, Rahul, for that great presentation and for the great Q&A session. Thank you, Michelle, as always, for helping us coordinate the session and the series and for moderating. And thank you to everyone in the audience for taking the time to join us today. I hope you learned a lot from this session and from the series as a whole. Just as 2 quick reminders, the session is being recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel for anyone who wants to revisit it, or if you want to share it with anyone who might have not been able to join us live today. And this is still an ongoing monthly series, so as a reminder for that as well, our next session will be on Thursday, May 15th at the same time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will have a team from Subsphere Corporation joining us to talk about AI-enhanced drone-based demining solutions. So if that is of interest, please write that down, but you'll get the reminders in your email anyways, as you always do. But registration is still open, so if there's anyone who might be interested and hasn't registered yet, please share that as well. And with that, just one last big thank you to everybody. Great session today, and yeah, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you.